Thank you. It's an honor to be asked to speak in front of you all. First, just a quick piece of business. Do we get to keep these pads? This is going to be huge. And not that I'm going to, but what do you reckon they'll get on eBay? I'm not saying I'm going to. It's pure curiosity. I'm not as eloquent as Mr. Shapiro. I sort of speak in beats and off the top of my head, and I've written a few down for you all today. First off, I come from a very blue-collar background. I grew up in North Hollywood, California. My dad was a school teacher, and my mom received welfare and food stamps, and told me very importantly when I was young, when I asked her if she would get a job, she said, "And lose my welfare benefits? No, thank you," which taught me a very valuable lesson, which was never to listen to my mom. All right. I ended up being a carpenter and then a boxing instructor, and met Jimmy Kimmel when I taught him to box for a morning zoo stunt, and eventually made my way onto TV and radio. In the early days of my career, I toured the country with Dr. Drew when we were on Loveline together, a syndicated radio program also on MTV, and we must have played 100 college campuses with nary a word of negativity, and no safe spaces and no stuffed animals being handed out. Simply went there, said our piece. Many controversial ideas were exchanged, and that's just what they were, exchanged. And then we got our paychecks and went home, and 15 years later, I went out with Dennis Prager, conservative talk show host, and attempted to do a show at Cal State Northridge, where my mother was an actual graduate from, with a Chicano Studies degree, believe it or not. So she's rolling in dough about now. And they pulled the plug on it. They gave us no good reason why we couldn't speak there, and we actually had to get attorneys involved to go back and speak at a later date. We're talking a lot about the kids, and I think they're just that, kids. We are the adults, and I don't think we are doing the children. I mean, these are 18 and 19-year-old kids that are at these college campuses. They grew up dipped in Purell, playing soccer games where they never kept score, and watching Wah Wah Wubsy. And we're asking them to be mature. We need the adults to start being the adults. Studies have shown that if you take people and you put them in a zero-gravity environment, like astronauts, they lose muscle mass, they lose bone density. We're taking these kids in the name of protection, we're putting them in a zero-gravity environment, and they're losing muscle mass and bone density. They need to live in a world that has gravity. When you need to expose your children to germs and dirt in the environment to build up their immune system. Our plan is put them in a bubble, keep them away from everything, and somehow they'll come out stronger when they emerge from the bubble. Well, that's not happening. Children are the future, but we are the present, and we're the adults, and we need to act like it. And I feel that what's going on these campuses is we need law and order. We need to bring back law and order, but I think if we just had order, we wouldn't need law. So could we just bring back order, and could the faculty and administration on these campuses act like faculty and administration, and most importantly, adults who are in charge of these kids who need some gravity in their life? Thank you.
Mr. Carolla, we've heard from the other side. We've heard from a couple of our witnesses about intent to cause violence. We've heard the term agitator used. We've heard that it's appropriate to criticize hate speech. When you're on campus, do you engage in hate speech?
Well, it's all in the ear of the beholder. That's the problem, and everyone's ears are getting super sensitive these days. I express ideas and ideas I believe in, and oftentimes jokes like, Mr. K, did they charge you extra for the nameplate? All the numbers are, like
I have a wraparound.
When you bring a van to the car wash, they charge you more. I just figure with 128 letters there. I try to be a little more philosophical about all this stuff, and I was at a Home Depot in Glendale, California 2 days ago, standing in the tool department, and a Taylor Swift song came on, and I was initially agitated. I just didn't feel like it was good thematically for me to be looking at rotohammers with Taylor Swift talking about how hot she was, pumping above my head like a halo. But all I did was keep shopping, keep walking. I realized some people like this music, some people don't like this music. It's the prerogative of whoever manages the Home Depot to play Taylor Swift at that time. I didn't complain, I didn't throw something at the speaker, and I didn't start a fire. I just got my tools, paid, and left. And I just thought if more people could do that with ideas they disagree with, or people they disagree with, or music they disagree with, it's not an endorsement of Taylor Swift. It's, I have a life to lead, I need a rotohammer, and I don't personally hold the manager of this Home Depot. Nothing against him if he or she wants to play Taylor Swift. And I think if people could just sort of have that in their mind, and I'm not saying don't have an opinion, and I'm not saying don't voice your opinion, but when other people are voicing their opinion or singing their song, sometimes it's time just to grab your rotohammer and head for the parking lot.
In your appearances on campuses, has your intentions ever been to cause violence on college campuses?
Oh, sorry for skirting the question.
No. It's a second question. It's a second question you did fine on the first.
Literally talking about Taylor Swift and skirting, mini-skirting the question. Of course not. Never. No. And I don't know who does have those ideas. I personally want to exchange ideas. I basically want to just take my ideas and put it into your head. But I don't want to put my fist or foot in your head.
Mr. Lawrence, do you think that when Mr. Shapiro is on campus that he has any intentions to cause violence or promote violence? Do you think he's an agitator, or do you think he engages in hate speech?
No, I have no reason to believe he's there to create violence. And in fact, I would say that the wise university president does not get in the business on a daily basis of calling First Amendment balls and strikes. Generally speaking, you want to let the game play on. You want ideas to be exchanged. Mr. Carolla wants to come to campus and do his seething critique of Taylor Swift. I would say have at it. But those aren't the hard cases that we're talking about. Where you do weigh in are precisely cases.
What do you mean they're not the hard cases? Mr. Shapiro has been shouted down, uninvited, violence at the thing. So what do you mean it's not the hard case? If you think his speech is appropriate, he's engaging in the kind of ideas, robust debate that we want on college campuses, then why is the reaction the way it is then?
There shouldn't be that reaction, and what I mean by not being a hard case is that it should not be a hard case for a university administration to protect his right to speak. I think there's no problem with that.
Yeah, it seems to be.
But what I mean by the hard cases is that when you do see a dramatic increase in white supremacist incidents on campuses, university administrators have to pay attention, and particularly when there are people who come from the outside, and the university president has a hard time keeping control of her or his campus. But that's a different situation from Mr. Carolla.
Mr. Shapiro, you an agitator?
Not as far as I'm aware. So I think that some of what's been said does mini-skirt the debate. Mr. Krishnamurthy, I got it right. When you were talking about the Wisconsin law, I believe that law was brought up in direct counter to what happened, and it was people talked about it on the floor of the legislature. In direct counter to what happened when I spoke at University of Wisconsin at Madison, where you had a bunch of protesters who stood in front of the stage and obstructed the stage, and then refused to leave. And when I asked the police would they remove the protesters at a certain, they've been going for 15 minutes. By the way, personally, two things, just to preface. I have no problem whatsoever with people protesting my speeches. I do have a problem with people who won't actually let me speak. And number two, as far as all the talk about white supremacy, I can speak from experience. Mr. Lawrence, your organization named me the #1 target of anti-Semitism online last year. So I have a trophy at my house, the #1 hated Jew in America. So I'm totally familiar with the level of vitriol that's become common in our politics. But one of the things that's a problem, and I think we have to be careful about, is when we say leave it to the administrators, and then the administrators do what they did at UW, which is the police. I said to the police, "Will you remove these protesters?" And the police said, "We have been told by the administration that if we remove the protesters, we are to shut down the event entirely. So we can't remove the protesters." We literally had to wait until they just got tired and walked out, basically. When that's the response of the administration, shouldn't there be some sort of repercussion for that? Because what I'm seeing is a heckler's veto that's taking place on campus. What I'm seeing is people who are not engaging in free speech designed to enrich the debate, but in order to shut down the debate. And there have to be some sort of ramifications for people who are actually committing trespass. I mean, this is not a question of free. Everyone is trying to focus in on this term hate crime and hate speech. But the important part of those phrases is not the first word. It's speech versus crime. So if there's a crime that's being committed, we're all in agreement. If somebody commits a crime and they're speaking of an imminent threat to somebody, of course that's a crime. But that has very little to do with the hate and a lot more to do with the crime as to whether that's prosecuted, because hate speech is not prosecutable, nor should it be policed by the campus. So the fact is that what we are seeing is a conflation between speech and active attempts to obstruct in order to promote the obstruction by some administrators on a few college campuses.
Can I add to that?
Sure can.
I think the bigger problem and what's sort of insidious here is I believe that the administration does not agree with Ben Shapiro and Ben Shapiro's thoughts and what Ben Shapiro is going to say. So it becomes a tacit agreement. They disagree. They're basically Steeler fans, and he's a Baltimore Ravens fan, and he's going to come up and make a speech, and all the Steeler fans say, well, he should be allowed to, but we're not a fan. And so quietly they go along with it. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a big problem. Everyone agrees on free speech. Everyone agrees that the college campus should be a petri dish of free speech or melting pot or whatever it is, a sea sponge of free speech. But when the administration doesn't agree with what Ben Shapiro has to say, they don't defend his right to say it as vigorously as they would if someone came on who they agreed with. It's quiet. No one ever talks about it, but I believe that's what's going on.
They tell him, like they did last week, that, there's no venue that will accommodate him in September.
But the administrators at the Kellogg Community College don't. They arrested students for handing out a Constitution. Can you imagine that? That's the height of irony. How far has this ridiculousness gone if students are arrested for handing out constitutions? This is the document that contains the First Amendment, the protection in there. I think maybe we have gone too far if this is now recognized as something that passes that threshold. Mr. Carolla, I know King George may have found this to be insightful, but do you find
it a basketball player? I don't keep up. On the Kings. I was just having a thought. No, I'm sorry. Continue your.
No, I just want to know: is this a threatening document? Does this cross the threshold?
Not unless there's a knife hidden inside of it.
Right.
No. But as I was hearing everyone speak, I never went to college. There's something I would like to touch on very quickly, which is going through diversity training, going to college. We're all sitting here, first off, under the assumption that 100% of kids go to college. I didn't know anyone who went to college, so I had to figure out a way to be a decent human being, not to be racist, not to be filled with hate, to be tolerant, minus college. I think that starts at home. So if you get to 18 or 19, I believe the cement on the sidewalk of your brain has already dried, and good luck carving your initials into it with diversity training. If you're a bad kid and we get hold of you in college, you're probably just going to be a bad adult. You need to learn to be a good human being from zero to college instead of us all converting you once you get to college. And especially since more than half the people don't end up in college. So we're sitting here with a grand plan of how to coach everyone up once they get to college. What if they never get to college? what about their parents and what kind of job are they doing coaching the kids up so that they need no coaching whether they go to college or not?
Mr. Heckler?
Geez, I want to talk about my white privilege so badly. I graduated North Hollywood High with a 1.7 GPA. I could not find a job. I walked to a fire station in North Hollywood. I was 19. I was living in the garage of my family home. My mom was on welfare and food stamps, and I said, can I get a job as a fireman? And they said, no, because you're not black, Hispanic, or a woman. We'll see you in about 7 years. And I went to a construction site and dug ditches and picked up garbage for the next 7 years. I got a letter in the mail sent to my father's house saying, your time has come to do the written exam for the LA Fire Department. I took it, and I was standing in line, and I had a young woman of color standing behind me in line, and I said, just out of curiosity, when did you sign up to become a fireman? Because I did it, or a person, 7 years ago, and she said, Wednesday. That is an example of my white privilege. I think it's an economic privilege more than it is the color of your skin. That being said, heckling people, busting their chops, making fun of them is an actual overture of love, friendship, and it's a positive thing. My friends, I hang out with Jimmy Kimmel and his cousin and many other comedians, Jeff Ross and people of that nature, and that's all we do. And the day that stops, that'll be the day I know they don't like me anymore. Now, obviously, doing it to strangers on campus is a different story, but lightening the mood a little bit and lightening up a little bit in general when people, I'm an atheist and I go out and do things with Dennis Prager. He's a devout Jew. He loves it when I make Jew jokes. I love it when he makes atheist jokes, and that's how we know that we're friends. And I'd say the same for Ben Shapiro as well, although I don't know if he loves it when I make the Jewish jokes.
No, it's fine with me.
Okay.
You guys are clearly not running for Congress.
My question for Mr. Carolla, and I'm sorry what you had to go through, the prejudice in our country, but
I landed on my wallet.
do you believe part of the problem here is it's easy to hate people and demonize people if you don't know any people like that? And maybe one of the reasons why we seem to have difficulty with free speech on college campuses, the way you wouldn't have difficulty in other American institutions, is because some of the faculty members on college campuses, they can spend, extensive periods of time without talking to anybody who has political opinions significantly different than their own. Is that part of the problem?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sort of bewildered by it because knowing guys like Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro, knowing them to be great guys, or even sometimes seeing what happens when Dr. Drew says something and the Twitter sphere goes ballistic and talking about what a bad person he is or what have you. Yeah, when you get to know almost anybody, you look at them as a person rather than an idea. And we need to look at people as human beings, not ideas or representatives of ideas. And it always helps when you're exposed. I personally, this may sound like a sidebar, but I grew up playing football. I played 10 years of organized football. I played with every different kind of human being, except the Jews, actually, Ben.
Females?
Maybe the holder.
Females?
Yeah.
Yeah, the punter.
Yeah, they cheered. Yeah, it was awesome. So I got exposed to everyone and realized that everyone who came from every different neighborhood was, there for one reason, and that was trying to win a game. And I think it helped a lot in my view of life. And then later on, when I stepped on a construction site, I got the same thing again. So I do feel like surrounding yourself with diversity in ideas as well as skin color is a good thing.
Okay.
Carolla, thanks for coming.
Thank you, man with the tan from Florida.
Try my best.
You don't have to recognize him as the man from Florida. We can all see where he hails from.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate that. It's hot there. We don't have the temperate climate that you guys have in LA, so it's 95 and heating right now.
Well, it's dry, but there are a lot of blowhards there in LA, so there's a lot of hot wind blowing around.
So what do you, I mean, you've kind of come here, we appreciate it. You know, you look at this experience, how do you view kind of what goes on in Washington as potentially being able to help stand up for free speech? Because, you know, we get involved in things, a lot of times we make it worse.
You know, I hosted a show called Loveline for over a decade, and I had a very unique perspective because I was able to talk to troubled kids, teenagers, 2 hours a night for a decade, and I really got to learn something about young people and how they work and what works and what doesn't work. And, you know, people say, well, you're not a professor, you never read a book, you never went to college, how are you an expert on this? And I say, well, I'm a journeyman carpenter as well. I've never read a book on carpentry, and who would you like to build your house? Someone who read a book on it or someone who just did it every day for over a decade? And I learned that all of these problems that we're talking about, free speech, discrimination, hatred toward other people, and drug addiction, violence, crime, it all stems from the family. And when the family is intact, much of this stuff just goes away. You don't have to legislate it away. It just goes away because people are brought up in intact families with decent, caring parents, whatever their color, whatever their background is, and then they produce little decent individuals who go off to college or a job, place of work, and they don't need to be coached up, and they don't need to be legislated, and they don't need to be bloviated by people like us. They grew up in an intact family. So my feeling is all the stuff we're talking about is at the outside of the rim. The hub is the family, and the discussions should center around the family and who is creating these people who think it'd be a good idea to take a baseball bat to the window of a Starbucks in their community.
I think that's well put, and if we could deal with that core, the free speech stuff, and a whole host of other problems would go, and that's better than any tax bill or anything else we could be doing, and obviously it's not going to be government's role per se, it's a societal thing.
To Mr. Carolla's point, right, it's a lot more about what kind of background and belief system they bring to the university.
I agree wholeheartedly. That starts at home. Anyone who's been in the corporate world knows you have to have sexual harassment training as well, and the cases of sexual harassment have probably gone up tenfold since the training began. So I don't see any direct line from training to effective application of it.
In fact, it could be almost the converse, right?
I feel it is,
yeah.
Yes.
So final question is to the heckler in the middle. When's the movie coming out again?
No Safe Spaces. Dennis Prager and myself have gotten together to do this subject, but the 86-minute version of it, not the 477-minute version. Yes, my bladder's very angry at you. Yeah, I think it's coming out mid-early 2018, so look forward to that.
Well, we look forward to it as well. I want to thank each of you for being